Hello and welcome to the Finding Something More to Talk About talk show. I'm Nancy Rench, your host, and I am so thrilled to finally meet my idol for the last few years, Suzy Toronto. When I first decided to launch this talk show, I immediately thought of Suzy. Why? Because she is the essence of what she herself calls herself, a wonderful, wacky woman. And I wanted to have someone that had high energy and fun and someone who could lift the spirit of women. And this is what she does in every single product, every artistic journey that she takes. She does every day. So I'm so thrilled to have her. Suzy, thank you for joining me on this first episode. I wanted to just kind of go back a little bit this morning because interesting enough, a plan B. I want to talk about plan Bs, but well, you and I had a little hiccup, and we're both probably, because just knowing the way that you write and the way that you pull up the raw emotions, I'm thinking, I know her, and I know she's probably thinking that crazy woman in California, and I'm thinking, what in the world? I just want to start out by asking you, so many questions. I'm sure you're asked so many times through the years, but first of all, when did you start your business? Like, what year was it?
We did our first art show with the wonderful Wacky women in 2001. Now, prior to that, I was doing art shows, but I was doing them with my fine art line. And so we were getting ready for a show, and I was going crazy. I had 5 children, and so I recruited my kids to help me get ready for the shows and everything. And my youngest son was in charge of cutting mats and framing. He was 18 at the time, and he is really good at it and everything. And so I had him in cutting and framing and everything else. And he is wackier than I am. I mean, there's no question that this, God knew that he was giving me this crazy, wacky child, because he takes it on himself to grab a bunch of my little doodles and drawings, and he framed those up too. And he shoved them in the back of the van with everything else. And when we got to the show site, and I'm unloading all the stuff and hanging everything else, and there's actually even more to that story that's pretty funny, but I don't even have time. But so I get all these, and I get there, and there's all these little wacky women characters, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what was this child thinking? Well, he had always loved those characters. People were getting into my van and were grabbing them out of the van before I'd even set up, and were buying them. So that was the very first show.
So if I'm hearing you right, so how you created the first image or caricature was from that event with your son.
When he was 8 years old.
When he was 8 years old. So that's how that came. So when I first stumbled onto you, I would say 5 years ago, I was searching high and low on Google, trying to figure out a theme for my annual, my company, Big Bear retreat. And I always want it to be really interesting and unique. I always give them a gift when they come and on their bed and when they leave, and just have a really fun theme. I just stumbled onto you, and I think what grabbed me first was the caricatures, and I'm like, whoa, what's this? It was all these funky, wonderful, crazy women. And then it was the colors and the arts, and then it was the framing. Just amazing. So to tell the audience a little bit about what we're talking about, so Suzy, you can tell them all of the products that you have, but the product is so meaningful behind the effort, what you're doing.
Yeah, well, the whole thing, because it had started with his first asking, he'd said, who is she who grew me in her tummy, was what he called her, his birth mother. And so at that point, we started calling everything, as I would do these little doodles, she who, grew me in her tummy, she who is with child, she who is a mother, she who is a survivor, she who is a teacher, things like that. And so what had happened is, after I drew this first little character, as other friends would have both trials and triumphs in their life, I would draw these little characters of them and kind of make it look like them. And it started growing, and I would always flip them over on the back side, and I'd write a little poem on the back off the top of my head.
So am I to hear you right here? So you were so were you artistic as a young child? I mean, you said you just, drove that. I'm
Yes,
wondering
yes.
where that artistic
I am the
ability.
daughter of an artist who is the daughter of an artist.
Okay.
My grandfather was an artist. During the Depression, put five daughters through private school being an artist during the Depression.
So, but when did you specifically, Suzy Toronto, realize that you had an artistic ability?
I was in second grade and they were having an art school contest.
Yeah.
And the contest was Christmas in Hawaii, where I'm from Hawaii. And so it was Christmas in Hawaii and we had to draw a picture of it. And so it was all paint. We had to use paint. And so I'm out there, I'm painting it, and I'm second grade, right? I got the whole thing going. And I remember pausing and looking around and just being mortified at everybody else's paintings, that they were so sad.
Yes.
Thinking, I am so going to win this, because I knew that what I had was better.
Was unique and different. Yes.
It was unique and different. Yes.
It was God-given.
Right. And it wasn't just then that I realized, I mean, I had always known that I come from an artistic family, obviously. My mother, when I was a very young child, had cancer. And I was just super hyper and super wild and crazy and everything. And so as she was recovering from her radiation treatments, she would paint through, because it was therapy for her. And just to keep me quiet, she put a couple of squirts of paint on a palette for me and a canvas, and I'd, make a mess of it and paint and do all my thing. And then the next day I'd come home from school and she would have whitewashed over the whole thing, giving me a clean canvas again. So by the end of the year, I had this canvas that was just thick with paint, but each painting had gotten better and better and better. And so it was just all, a combination of, I think, genetics as well as nurturing from my mother.
So really your family, really, they are the ones who influenced you and gave you your wings, right? Is that?
Yeah, and I think that, like I said, I do believe that a lot of it was genetic as far as that was concerned. As I went through school and through high school and even into college, I wanted to be a writer. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to write a book.
Obviously, you're a fabulous writer. We'll talk about that.
Thank you.
Okay, so who inspired, or how did you get to the Sisterhood of Wonderful Wacky Women? Because I bought that book for everybody. I mean, that was a theme one year. It's amazing. So where did you come up with it, and what have you done with that particular phrase?
Right. So first of all the women in my life are wonderful, wacky women. Because of the women in my life, I have been surrounded by the most amazing, wonderful, wacky women, to be my mothers, my daughters, my sisters, my friends, that have inspired me and uplifted me and empowered me to be who I am today. And through all the trials and triumphs that I have been through, I feel like it is those women that have stood beside me, that have been there in my deepest,
but did that just
hour.
come to you one day? I mean,
yes. I've just always called myself wacky. And, so then when we started talking about wacky women, so many people thought of that as being a negative term. So being the writer that I am, we mitigated that by putting the wonderful in front of it, so that it's wonderful, wacky women. And to me, being wacky is not being careless. It's not being, it's not negative. It's not crazy. It's about being free-spirited. And for me, the reason that I feel like I can be free-spirited is because I know exactly who I am, what I stand for, and that gives me the ultimate freedom to be myself. So when we figured out the wonderful, wacky women theme, and someone asked me why I was so profoundly strongly feeling about women, and I said, it is such a sacred thing to me. My friends, my sisters, my mother, all the women in my life are so sacred to me. They are a sacred sisterhood. Yeah. And voila, there was the answer. It's the sacred sisterhood of wonderful women.
And I'm sure it just flew off of the... Yeah.
And I do think that, from a marketing point of view, I think that having that also mitigates the wacky. It's a whole encompassing thing, And like you said, you were attracted to it probably a lot because of those words.
I think that your wording, your phrasing is so raw, it's so pure, it's so real, it's so me, it's so you, it's so everyone, that we all can relate and connect to just about everything. Every product that you have is over the top amazing. I mean, it just really, really is. So I have a question. So how did you decide and how did you create your business? Like, how did you start it? Regarding your social media, and just like kind of take the audience through, okay, I started word of mouth, or I started, did you have somebody that sponsored you, or did you just
art shows? We started with art shows.
Okay.
And it did not take long at all before just talking with the women at the shows. I loved visiting and hearing their stories. That allowed me to not only grow my fan base, but it also allowed me to grow as a writer and as an artist, as people would come in and tell me their stories, and I would use that as a jumping platform, realizing that we are all very, very much alike. Yes. And the experiences that one woman had gone through would be similar to what, and so I would use those stories and I would expound on them and jump from there. So we started doing art shows, and it wasn't long after doing art shows that we were approached by manufacturers at the art shows. And they would say, we're interested in licensing your work. And I said, okay, great.
So they were drawn to the artistic part first, right?
Well, no, they were catching the whole vision. There was no question. Yeah, the licenses were catching the whole vision, as were the stores. When we were doing an art show, we would set up in the streets, the white tents down the street for the art show. And it seemed like they always stuck me in front of the cutest little boutique gift shop in the entire town. And by the end of the show, the owner of the gift shop would come out and she'd say, I don't know what you're selling, but I know that I want it because you've got women in your booth that are crying and laughing. And she says, we sent some of our salespeople out into your booth. And she says, everybody thought that they knew each other, and come to find out none of these women knew each other, but they were all just consoling each other and talking to each other and connecting. And so we started getting stores that way.
From a business standpoint, as a woman and creating this, so if I'm understanding this correctly, you started with no funding. You started organically in ways, different kinds of ways, and you drew people in one by one, basically through art show, and it sort of grew. What was the first social media platform you used?
I believe it was just, obviously when we first started in 2001, email was just barely starting back then for us anyway. And it really wasn't until I think Facebook probably got started that we took off with Facebook. And still to this day, Facebook is our primary social media that we use. Of course, we do email marketing and things like that as well.
Right. And do you have so how many associates do you work with now? Have you tried to keep it contained and small, or are you?
At our biggest, we had 26 employees, and that was 6 years ago. And we had a warehouse, and we were fulfilling orders, and it was. And I looked at my husband and I said, "This isn't fun anymore. Yeah. I don't want to do this.
I'm too big. I'm too big.
I'm too big. I don't want to do this anymore." And so it was then that we decided to outsource everything. Oh. And so we, because at this point we had, so many licenses in the industry, we had so many stores that were carrying our line. I was able to make some connections at that point. I also had a lot of different people that were on retainer for me. I had an attorney on retainer. I had my editors on retainer. I had all these different people. So I had a lot of great feedback and input. And I'm a firm believer that you can't expect to do it all yourself. Right. If you do, your work will suffer, your art will suffer, your writing will suffer, whatever it is. You need to find people who are good at what they do, and you hire them and you empower them. So I asked my team, how do we get rid of this, basically? And we were able to find a company that took over all of our fulfillment. And so all of our fulfillment now actually happens out of the West Coast, where you are, up in Oregon, though. Oh, and good. So we got rid of that. That was really wonderful because it was such a headache. And I mean that in a really nice kind of way.
Yes, of course.
It was just too much.
Well, it was a headache. It was a headache. So what was the very first item that you decided, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to, let's sell this and let's see how it goes. What was that?
Okay. Our first item, and I don't know if I have one around here anymore. I don't think I do. our art prints. We sell art prints at the art shows. And in order to get into the art shows, we had to have the art prints.
You know,
and as a matter of fact, we did art shows for the entire 20 years. I just did my very last art show this past weekend. I am officially retired from art shows.
Okay.
And so, but we sold prints, which you can find on my website. And then from the prints, we had so many people saying, oh my gosh, you should write a book. You need to write a book. These are so wonderful. These stories that you write are so wonderful. And so I wrote a book. And I had so much fun writing it. And it's the red one that you're talking about, the first one, this one here. Anyway, so I wrote this book and immediately went to some of this was early in the game too. This was before I really had a lot of licenses or stores. And I went to several different publishers and they were like, yeah, we're not so sure about this. And, you know, I got the really nice negative letter and moved on. And so finally I went to my husband and I said, you know, I really believe in this. I really, really believe in this. And I said, how can I expect these publishers to take a chance on me if I'm not willing to take a chance on it myself? And he said to me, Suze, you know, we vowed the day we started this business that we were not going to go in debt for it. We limped along doing art shows and funding it ourselves and you know, not going into debt at all. And I said, but how are we going to get this published? I said, I know it's going to be successful. So he said, okay, we'll go into debt. And so we actually took out a $25,000 loan, thought I was going to end up with, you know, 5,000 books that I'd never get rid of.
Right. Bring them on. I'll get rid of them for you.
Anyway, the first 5,000 arrived and I can still remember them coming into our garage and thinking, what have I done?
Like, what
made me think anybody was going to buy these things, right? And I was just in a panic. And at that point, we had one employee. We had one girl that was great at working sales. And in 2 weeks, she'd sold them all.
Wow.
All of them.
Wow.
And we with that money, we were able to pay ourselves back, plus do a second order of books.
Well, it just goes to show anybody is listening to this that when you're inspired and you innately know that you have a gift somewhere, that you have to just go and you just have to do it. Like my theme this year for my company is just do it. Just do it. I have one more question for you.
But wait. I want to say one more thing about the book. So what's really fun about the book is that, like I said, I believed in it myself. I knew that it was something that would connect with women. And so we went to press, like I said, for our first 5,000, our first 10,000. Those numbers are scary when you're thinking about the fact that you're stocking them up in your garage, right, before you have a warehouse and everything else. And I am so glad that I did believe in myself, because in the self-publishing world, if you can sell 10,000 books, you're considered a bestseller. And I have sold now self-published 280,000.
Oh, well, my gosh, congratulations.
That we self-published. Yes, I'm very, very proud of that. And we have since now licensed this off to a publisher. So from 280,000 plus is with another publisher. But in-house ourselves, we did 280,000 copies. So I'm pretty proud of that. Yay!
I'm proud. You know, I'm proud.
Is if you don't believe in yourself, you know, how is somebody else going to stand up and just do it? You know, if you feel it in your heart, go for it.
Yes. So. Yes, I agree. I'm going to ask you this last pointed question, which should be more of a fun for you. What is your superpower, Suzy?
What is my superpower? I can make children talk.
Oh.
You know how teenagers, you ask them a question, they grunt. I can get children to talk. I can get 3-year-olds to answer in complete paragraphs. I'm really good at that. I don't know why, but I love talking to children, and children from 2 to 25. I call 25-year-olds still children, but I love young people, and I love talking with them, and I love helping them to open up their mind and their voices to be able to talk. And I also love to share with them how to use their voice for good. That I believe that words have the power to move mountains
Yes.
And and they also have the power to do a significant amount of damage, as we've seen on social media this last year. And I think that it's wonderful to give voices to young people. And I do think that that's one of my strengths that I love to exercise. That's my superpower.
That's lovely. Well, as you know, and most of the audience who are listening knows, my company is Finding Something More, dedicated to inspiring women to look beyond circumstances and to reach for something more. And that's exactly what you do, is you help these women find something more every single time they use your coffee mug, or they, use your bookmark, or read your book. I mean, you have so many products, but you are lifting the spirit of women. And I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you. Kudos for all the work you've done since the early 2000s. You've definitely touched me. And I'm looking forward to having you back in a few weeks on another show. But before we leave, would you go ahead and tell our audience where they can find you?
Absolutely. You can find me on my website at SuzyToronto.com. That's SUZY Toronto, just like the city. No, I'm not Canadian. I'm just my last name, SuzyToronto.com. You can also find me on Facebook at Suzy Toronto.
Thank you for joining us today on the Finding Something More to Talk About talk show. See you next time, as there's always something more to talk about.